So
it's the only solution to the problem we've got. As I say, there was no link between drugs and crime beforehand.
But do the government want to legalise drugs? Because then if drugs are legalised, the prison system numbers drop. Even pharmaceutical drugs, because methadone is a massive problem in Scotland. It's a drug that it's just $1 billion industry as well in itself. Do these numbers want to be dropped, or is it a money organisation where not just criminals are involved in drugs, but also the people who are involved in a higher scale, even the police force governments? Is there a lot of corruption inside the police as well?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of questions there, but basically, first of all, I want to point out that legalising, in the activism world, we tend to try and avoid the word legalise because people find it a scary word, and it sort of gives an idea of a free-for-all. Well, the thing is, it's a free-for-all now. It's the Wild West out there. It really is. There is no control. The people who decide what goes in what drugs and who they're sold to are organised criminals. It should be licensed premises. So legally regulating drugs is about getting them under control, like we do alcohol. But of course, alcohol could be controlled better.
Yeah, of course.
But at least you can tweak alcohol regulation. You can do, because it's regulated.
I think alcohol is just one of the biggest drugs out there. It's more glorified, it's more socially acceptable. It's every second shop.
Well, there is clear evidence that it's the most dangerous drug.
Yeah, so
very clear. Yeah, very clear. But the people who don't want legal regulation is organised crime. So the closer we get to legal regulation, there will be pushback from organised crime. And they will use their methods of corruption to try and stop that progression. But as for corruption, well, yeah, I mean, corruption is huge.
It's everywhere.
It's massive, but I'll tell you, I mean, I've come into contact with police corruption quite a lot of times, but perhaps the most significant event I'll tell you about, if you like.
Of course.
Again, I'll take you back to Nottingham, where I met Cammy. Cammy introduced me to one of the gangsters who was in the team of Colin Gunn. About 4.5 months into the operation. The day after that, 2 of my backup team went off sick. So I got 2 new people to come onto the team. I met the first one, shook his hand, had no problem with him. The second one, shook his hand, and the hairs just went up in the back of my neck. And, you know, when you've been on the streets day after day, feeling at risk, your senses are quite fine-tuned. You know, you're really sensitive to body language. And this guy was just wrong. So I spoke to the boss and said, look, boss, I can't have this guy knowing what I'm doing. So he excluded them both, so they didn't ask any questions, and they never found out what the job is about. 12 months later, Colin Gunn is brought down, brilliant work by Nottinghamshire Constabulary, and it was found that cop that I'd taken exception to, a guy called Charlie Fletcher, was an employee of Colin Gunn. He'd been paid to join the police, and he was paid £2,000 a month on top of his police wages for information, and plus bonuses for good information. By the time I'd met him, he'd been in the police for 7 years. 7 years. You can look him up. The newspaper stories of his conviction is online. Charlie Fletcher. Now, I have to make something really clear. That kind of corruption can only be paid for by the money from the illicit drug supply. There's 2 reasons for that. For one, there's more money in the illicit drug supply than anything else. But 2, the way we police drugs creates monopolies. See, police are really good at catching drug dealers. Brilliant at it. They'll catch them day after day. They'll catch twice as many if you give them twice as much resources. They will do. But they never shrink the market. The market never reduces. Ever. You can arrest the drug dealer, you just create an opportunity for another one. Or 2 more. So, by policing drugs and arresting people, you thin out the competition for the most successful gangsters. And in fact, the best gangsters use police informants to get rid of the competition. The police do the business for them.
Is there a lot of high-profile gangsters who are snitches? I believe there's a lot of informants out there who don't go to prison because they're also working with the police.
Yeah.
Do you see that a lot? A lot of high-profile names giving the police information to keep them off their back, but also jail the competition around them.
That's exactly how it works. And in fact, there's a chapter in Drug Wars where we interviewed a guy called Frank Matthews, who was a high-profile informant handler in the Met, and he realised the extent of police corruption, and he started reporting on it, whistleblowing. He'd put so many gangsters in prison, he chased organised crime all of his career. Only at the point when he started grassing up fellow police officers did he realise his life was at threat. He thought he was going to get murdered, and in fact he had to be snatched, he had to be taken away and put into witness protection to protect him from corrupt police.
So what's the fine line then between entrapment also, if you're sitting at a party or sitting buying drugs off someone or taking it in front of them, where does the entrapment charge come into play, where it's like you're setting it up, but what is entrapment? Where